found Mr. Meadows in his office on the couch. He was scrolling through his phone. I remember leaning against the doorway and saying, I just had an interesting conversation with Rudy, Mark. It sounds like we're going to go to the Capitol. He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, there's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real bad on January 6th.
Some more of the bombshell testimony from today of former Mark Meadows aide Cassidy Hutchinson before the January 6th committee. Look, there's just no denying that today's hearing was the most critical to date. But the question is, will it change anything? Will it change anything legally? Will it change anything politically? From a legal standpoint, you need knowledge and intent when it comes to the violence. And they may be a little closer, but I still don't know that the evidence is enough to lead the DOJ to act. And while Hutchinson testified that Trump knew about weapons being confiscated at his speech, she didn't really establish a link to Trump knowing about the violence being planned at the Capitol. He's allowed to want people to go to protest at the Capitol. And remember, he had used the word peacefully. And so much of what she testified to was hearsay. Where are the people who were actually there? Still, some believe that this part of the testimony, where Hutchinson talked about Trump's reaction to the hang Mike Pence chants at the Capitol, might be some serious hot water for the former president.
I went back to my desk. A couple minutes later, him and Pat came back, possibly Eric Hirschman too. I'm pretty sure Eric Hirschman was there, but I'm confident it was Pat that was there. I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. To which Pat said something, this is effing crazy. We need to be doing something more. Briefly stepped into Mark's office. And when Mark had said something, said something to the effect of, he doesn't think they're doing anything wrong, knowing what I had heard briefly in the dining room, coupled with Pat discussing the hang Mike Pence chants in the lobby of our office, and then Mark's response, I understood there to be the rioters in the Capitol that were chanting for the vice president to be hung.
Certainly a shocking anecdote. We'll discuss some of the other legal questions raised today. But how about politically? This has to be an enormous boon, not necessarily for the Democrats, but to the already surging candidacy of Ron DeSantis. Republican primary voters believe Donald Trump was grabbing a car steering wheel and flipping over tables, fine with rioters hanging Mike Pence. Even the most ardent fans may think the Florida governor is a better option. Joining us now is Alex Little. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Department of Justice, both under Presidents Bush and Obama, and Linda Chavez. She served in the White House under 3 different Republican presidents. Thank you both for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, Alex, let me start with you. From the legal perspective, do you think anything changed today?
I do. I think you have some firsthand testimony, especially about what Mark Meadows said and knew that leading up to the days of January 6th that are going to be particularly damaging. The fact that the White House was expecting something to go wrong or there to be things be very bad at the Capitol, I think that's pretty damaging. I also think that the president's awareness of weapons, his sort of statement, let them come through, they're not going to hurt me, does betray he knew, or at least was willing to be okay with the fact that they could hurt others with those weapons. That's particularly damaging, knowing what happened later, and there were police officers who were hurt with those weapons. I think those two anecdotes are particularly damaging. And then the car testimony is interesting because, there's the dramatic idea of the president reaching for the front. But what's more, I think, important there is it shows the president wanted to go to the Capitol, which Mark Meadows had said in his book wasn't true. There's now at least 2 different people testifying that it was true. And it suggests he was warned not to go there. He was told it was going to lead to violence, and he still wanted to go anyway. That's pretty damaging from the perspective of looking at his state of mind.
But Alex, before I get to the political side of this, isn't it a little odd, though, that they haven't presented the testimony of the Secret Service agents themselves? I mean, this is very damning in many ways, but you would think the Secret Service has said we're fully cooperating. We've heard committee members say that they have actually interviewed some of the Secret Service members involved. And so the question would be, why not incorporate that into her testimony here, right?
So I think the testimony, as we understand it from Engel, has been, and there was some reporting on this that came out today after Hutchinson's testimony, that he and President Trump disagreed about whether he should go to the Capitol or to the White House. So, a lot of times, if you're thinking about you're the committee, how you ask the questions, the Secret Service may not want to tell you every detail of that interaction. He may have just testified truthfully about the fact that there was a conflict between them and not given the color. What we know about this witness, Hutchinson, is that she maybe didn't change her testimony, but she certainly provided more details when she had a different lawyer. So it'll be interesting to see how her testimony now affects future opportunities for those Secret Service agents to testify. We will almost certainly hear from them again.
Linda Chavez, politically, how does this affect Republicans?
Well, I think there are a whole lot of Republicans that wish that Donald Trump would just go away. And he has, in large part, he's not on Twitter anymore. I mean, his Truth Social has a very minor reach. So he's not able to reach the kind of audience that he used to. But there are a lot of Republicans who want to be president. They believe that 2024 is going to be a great year for Republicans. Biden is very unpopular. His policies are unpopular. And this could be a Republican year, but not with Donald Trump at the helm. And so I think this is a boon to all those people wanting to run and to be the nominee in 2020.
Because as a legal matter, I still think that you're going to need one more link here in terms of Donald Trump having advanced knowledge of the violence, not just of people having weapons with them, et cetera. We shall see on that. But as a political matter, Linda, it does seem to me that these anecdotes, at the very least, portray Donald Trump in a light where I don't think it's going to have a big impact for Democrats. I don't think it's going to impact 2022 or maybe even 2024, depending on if Donald Trump runs, but could have a very big impact within the Republicans where people say, for example, Ron DeSantis has a lot of the same policies that I like, but he doesn't have the baggage.
That's exactly right. I mean, you can't imagine virtually any of the other contenders behaving in this way. I mean, he was behaving like a 2-year-old, throwing his lunch against the walls. There she is having to wipe ketchup from the walls in the Oval Office. I can tell you, having worked in the White House under Ronald Reagan, a man who wouldn't even enter the Oval Office without his suit jacket on, you just couldn't imagine such a scene under a normal Republican. And so I think this is going to have a role to play. And part of it is that people have been intimidated by Donald Trump. They've been afraid of Donald Trump. They've not been willing to speak out. But you have had a whole cast of characters from Bill Barr to Cassidy Hutchinson coming up, all of them Republicans, all of them conservatives, and being willing to go against Donald Trump. And nothing has happened to them. Donald Trump does not have the power to punish these people.
Linda Chavez, thanks for coming back on the show. Appreciate it. Alex Little, thank you for coming on. Look forward to having you both back.
Thank you.
Coming up, thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.